So, hi, Zannah. Do you want to introduce yourself to us?
My name's Zannah, I'm 18 and I'm going to talk about my experience with mental health.
Yeah.
So everything really started about 5 years ago or more, and when I started struggling with an eating disorder. I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa when I was 13, and the period before and after that was just, I was just really struggling with my self-image, issues of control, and that was just how it presented itself. From there, it sort of, I went through a big change, and I became incredibly depressed, suicidal, began self-harming. This was about sort of a year, 2 years after eating had sort of started to slide. And yeah, this was when I was from the ages of about 14 to 16. I had sort of a roller coaster of being up a bit more, but overridingly at the time being incredibly low and hopeless, and just finding that there was no way out. I at this time was at school full time, which didn't really, there was a lot of, I think that made everything a lot harder because of the people I had to deal with and just the constant pressure of everything that I had to do. But despite that, I managed to, so I did my GCSEs. I was really happy with how I did, especially given everything that was going on at the time, and started sixth form, and I would say, so that was 2 years ago, and that's when things sort of started to pick up a lot, and just got a lot brighter. And sort of since then, I've had a lot of dips, but I'm currently in a place where I'm overall better than I've ever been before.
Have you always been in a good place then? At times you say there were dips. How far do you think you dipped at times?
In general, or just
in your mental health?
Really bad dips. Not necessarily recently. Well, there have been a couple, but yeah, the worst time was when I was about 14, I'd say, and this was just where I was incredibly hopeless. I felt like I was in just a hole that I couldn't get out of. I saw no future. I felt like there was no way of coping. I kept a journal at this time, and I was reading it recently, and just the constant message was just I had no way out. I didn't ever see that anything would ever get better. I used to get frustrated with people saying that things would be fine because they just weren't, and I couldn't, there was no point in my head that I could see that I won't feel like this one day. I remember I kept thinking I'd hit rock bottom, and then something would happen and I would just hit this new level of bottom, and it was just, it's really, really difficult. That was when self-harm became an issue, just because it was the only way I felt like I could release sort of what was happening. It was incredibly destructive, but just an indicator of how bad stuff was.
What sort of help did you get at this time?
So I started seeing a counsellor with a charity, and also was referred to CAMS after I was diagnosed with the eating disorder. And so for the first year I was seeing sort of both of these at the time. So I was having CBT with CAMS, and then weekly counselling with my personal counsellor, who I had an incredibly good relationship with, and just was someone that really understood me and helped me cope with everything that I was having to sort of deal with. Then there was a period where it coincided with when everything went really bad, where I wasn't seeing anyone, just because things had sort of stagnated with eating disorder, and just the charity I was seeing the counsellor with shut down, lost contact with CAMS for a period, and I think that was the point where I just realised how much counselling had helped and how much I needed that space to talk to and feel understood and feel listened to. And so when I started seeing my counsellor again and went back to CAMS, it got to the point where I literally would live for that hour session where I was in a safe place with someone that didn't judge me, understood me, I could cry, I could be myself, and that would be what would get me through the week, because I knew I had that hour of feeling better, and that would sort of keep me, or sort of my head above water for as much as it could. I was also put on antidepressants. The first ones that I was put on helped me get out of that place where I just felt like I couldn't function, and I couldn't do anything, but really I struggled with numbness a lot. And so since I've changed the medication that I'm on, and it helps a lot more, the one that I'm on now.
Good. And what about things at school? Were there things that helped at school or things that didn't help at school?
So when things initially sort of started, I was at a middle school that had no experience of, well, what felt like no experience of dealing with children that were struggling, because I was so incredibly young. It was quite overt that teachers, many of them had no training. There wasn't really a person that had been well versed in doing this. It was my head of year that would deal with stuff, and just wasn't helpful in many respects at all, and would say stuff that was quite destructive, not from any fault of their own, just because they hadn't been taught of how to deal with children that were going through something like that. And yeah, also the kids at school had no education. I'd never been educated on it in school, so I don't know how I would expect them to, and it was sort of just things they'd learned from social media or magazines or other places that tend to glamorise and falsely stigmatise eating disorders. So that really didn't help, because the pressures of having to feel as if you were living up to some standard that students have got an idea of mental health, but then also being incredibly feeling like you're quite ostracised and stigmatised for what you're dealing with. When I moved schools and things got really bad, I actually had an incredible support network at the school, just because the school had a really great pastoral support system, and that really helped, because again, that was a place in a school where I didn't feel safe and I didn't feel myself because of the change. I did feel incredibly supported, but the problem with this was, again, the lack of awareness among pupils of anything mental health related. I felt ashamed and embarrassed to be going to somewhere like that, which was just horrible to have. The only place that I felt that I was safe and understood in school was just tainted with feeling like the other students were going to make a massive thing, and because I did have really bad experiences with comments, and it was I was quite private about everything, which I just felt like I had to be, which is again something that's really unhelpful. The whole, I feel like I can't talk to anyone because I have no idea what they're going to think. I had great friends, but in general, my peers just weren't versed in what to do. I had a lot of negative comments and stuff about self-harm, because it was just, there was no actual awareness of why people self-harmed, what people can be dealing with. It was sort of misconstrued as this attention-seeking, sort of messed up way of, I don't know, and yeah, so that was really difficult and made things a lot worse, because I was bottling things in, which just never helps anyone, and just feeling like you're going through absolute hell, and yet you're being targeted for that is just one of the worst things that you can sort of process. So yeah, that was not great.
Okay, and now what's the future like for you?
So the last 2 years have actually been really great, in terms of, I've had, ever since I started sixth form, so even while everything was quite bad, I did my GCSEs, I got results I was really happy with, and I started sixth form, and actually it was a really constructive change for me. That combined with being on new medication, and I'd been at this point in therapy for 4 years, and just things started to pick up. I had a real uplift a couple of years ago. I remember just being there how is this happening? Because I was at a position just a couple of years before where just everything was so bleak. But yeah, it just unexpectedly does just like improve incredibly. Yeah, I've had peaks and troughs between then and now, but I'm generally in a much better place. I've got a place at Cambridge University. I did my A-levels and got results in really well.
Counselling's not a quick fix, but at my worst times it was a way that I could cope, and at my best times it was a way of understanding myself, my condition, my mind a lot more, and eventually helping me recover. There's always going to be good and bad, but just keep going and one day it will pick up.
Thank you very much.